Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Legacy Deluxe Class Pretender Shell Skullgrin. Probably my most anticipated figure out of Wave 3 for the Deluxe assortment. I thought that the Pretender that we got as part of the core class, Iguanus, was sick. Really like the idea of them basically taking those Pretenders and turning them into essentially their own unique characters, and this guy's a Deluxe class, so surely he should be better than that core class rendition. Well, kind of. Here we have him in the robot mode, and I mean, it's a pretty cool take on this guy. I think in terms of a design, Skullgrin has always been one of the coolest Pretenders, as he has this really wickedly sinister, demonic ram skull head, and as you guys can see, sculpted fairly nicely, although has no paint on it at all, which I think is a shame, as there's some really nice sculpt work, especially here for the horns. Now, I'm going to talk accessories first of all. As you guys can see, we do get these massive turrets which attach onto the back. They are removable, so if you wanted to, you could peg them into any of the mech tech ports that we have on the side of the shoulders, or you can actually take the entire back region, which you'll need to do for transformation anyhow, and attach it, although you'll lose this rather cool looking reptilian tail. And in terms of actual handheld weapons, he has these blasters which can also double as blades, but sadly they've been cast out of this pretty crap rubbery pliable plastic. Now this is really poor in my opinion. We are paying so much for deluxe figures nowadays, and to see this type of material is a shame. And these are paint strippers. As you guys can see, just inserting these into the MechTech port has stripped basically all of the paint in the port, which is unfortunate, and the same can also be said here for this side. So I wouldn't recommend actually leaving them pegged in for long-term use, as you'll no doubt damage the paint on your Pacific figure. But decently painted. I do like the gunmetal grey that we have for this section. I mean, it kind of resembles a blaster. We'll see more of these when we actually get down to the hover tank mode. But taking a look here at the design of Skullgrin, I think the best figure out of Wave 3 Deluxe. I've been massively disappointed with the majority of these figures, but this one from robot mode does actually appear to be pretty decent. I think the shoulder design looks cool. We do get some sick looking horns sticking out to the side. The paint detail for the chest looks awesome. I really like how all of the Pretenders so far have kind of had their bot mode face as their skirt piece. That looks really nicely done. So the skull looks cool. I think the arm design also doesn't look too bad. We've got some more really nice jagged spikes sticking out here for the hip skirts, and overall the robot mode design is pretty nicely done. I really can't fault it at all. Now, articulation wise, Skullgrin does have a tremendous ball joint here at the head, which allows him to look pretty much all of the way up. Sadly, we don't get any underjaw, but if my memory serves me correctly, the original toy didn't have either. You can take the tusks and, much like the TLK Megatron, close them in to form an almost battle mask, which I thought was pretty cool, although that's mainly due to transformation. The head can look left to right, full rotation here out of the shoulder, hinge joint out to the side, rotation at the bicep, slightly past 90 here at the elbow. Sadly, no form of wrist rotation, although due to transformation, you can actually pivot the hand down, which is awesome for the blades. I mean, to get him in a pose where it actually looks like he's pointing this sword at you, I think is really nicely done. So that's pretty cool. We do get a proper uncompromised waist rotation. The tail can hinge up and down due to transformation. 90-degree bend here out of the hips as well as backwards. They can also kick out to the side to a decent range before the skirt does sadly restrict them. Rotation here at the thigh, 90 there at the knee, and finally a decent ankle pivot. So in all, a pretty decently designed figure, but my biggest issue with this release is the scale. As you guys know, this is supposed to be a Pretender, and the first Pretender that we got as part of Legacy was the awesome Iguanus, who was in the core class scale. Now to me, it just makes perfect sense to keep the Pretenders in one coherent scale class, whether that be Deluxe or core class. Let me know down in the comment section below, but to have them in two different scale classes really doesn't make much sense, and I just think it would have been so cool to have either seen Iguanus upscaled to the Deluxe class or seen Skullgrin downscaled to the core class. But here we have these guys for a comparison. I mean, they look pretty cool. If I'm going to be honest, as an overall figure, I still think Iguanus is better, especially when it comes down to the alt mode, but just so you can see how they roughly pair. Both have those super cool, weird looking reptilian tails at the back, and overall, I mean, they're pretty reminiscent to their original G1 shells. Here we have him alongside the Deluxe class Cliffjumper, as well as Cosmos, and I can only apologise for the head being completely blasted out by the review station. As mentioned previously, there is no paint on this at all, meaning that it is just completely white in terms of colour scheme, but definitely a decently sized Deluxe, towers over these two mini bots. Here he is alongside the Voyager Ranger class Megatron and the Earthrise Leader class Optimus Prime, and finally alongside Kingdoms Deluxe Black Arachnia and the Core class Studio Series Wheelie. So in all, a pretty decent robot mode. I really can't fault it as far as the design goes. I just wish that Hasbro had stuck to one scale class for these pretenders, as to me it just doesn't make sense to have some of them as Core class and some of them as Deluxe class, and in Legacy Evolution we'll no doubt see a few scattered around Voyager Deluxe and again Core class. But anyhow, let's turn to transformation. Surprisingly, despite this guy having a super weak alt mode, the transformation is actually one of the more involved Deluxe figures for Wave 3. So to kickstart things off, you're going to want to take the tail, just collapse that up like so. We can then remove this section just to make the transformation slightly easier for ourselves. You'll then want to take the hands and just collapse those into these hollow cavities. I would then recommend taking the tusks and compressing those, but yet lifting the head all the way up just like this, so that we can actually get a hold of this front chest piece, pull this forward. That will then allow us to take the back piece and detach it from the central column. We can then hinge the head in, and then at the same time take these back horns and just hinge those there to the back. You'll then want to hinge this all the way up so the head sculpt actually slides in, and then we can just compress the chest piece. Come around here to the back. You'll then want to take this section, is on a slider joint, so just hinge that up until it clicks into place, hinge the arms in, and then rotate here just like so, and there's a tiny slot on the bicep that will just snap here into this peg. So rinse and repeat, snap that section in there, and just combine the two halves. So that's basically the more simpler part of the transformation completed. You'll then want to take the hip skirt and hinge this section down. Once that's done, we can then take the hips, kick these here forwards. So rather complex, I'm not going to lie. What we can then do is take the treads, detach those here from the back of the legs. Now, one thing worth mentioning is that for whatever reason, this entire section too is made out of a very pliable PVC material. So not too sure as to why they chose to do that. Perhaps it's to avoid some of the yellowing that we've seen on some of the most recent Transformers figures. But anyhow, there is a slot here that will peg into this tab. So let's just snap that there into place. We can then take the tread, rotate this up, and this tab will actually peg there into this slot. And the same can also be said here for this tab. This will peg into that slot. So hinge this section up, snap that there into place very securely. We can then take the shin, shift this section here up, and there is a slot here that will slide into this tab, and a tab that will peg into a slot here on the inside. So just compress that. We can then take the foot, hinge this up, snap that there into place, and rinse and repeat the same process here for this side. So like I said, very complex transformation for an alt mode which sadly is going to leave a lot to be desired. So spoilers alert, what we can then do is snap that into place. We can then hinge this here up and over, snap all of this into place, and then for some finishing touches, snap this in. And basically that is the alternate mode without any of the accessories pegged on. So let's bring some of these in, which really are the saving grace for this form in my opinion. Take the turrets, snap them here into place, and then as far as these blades go, this is where they've sadly stripped some of the paint off. So for alt mode, they are supposed to peg into this mech tech port here, and then this slot is meant to be fulfilled via this tab. So you are supposed to tab them in, although it's a very, very tight grip. And like I said, this material is just prone to stripping paint off. You'll then want to do the same here for this side. So snap all of that in, and here we have Skullgrin fully transformed up into what I think is supposed to be a Cybertronian hover tank, although to be quite honest, I find this to be incredibly lazy. It's basically a static brick in this mode. I don't think that you're really going to get any play value out of this at all. There's no wheels on the base. It is rather ugly, I'm not going to lie, and whilst it does bear some resemblance to how it originally appeared back in the day, I just think they really should have updated the design. So in terms of sculpt work, to be honest, there really isn't much to discuss. Basically, we saw all of this in the robot mode. I do think the turrets look pretty decent, especially as far as the sculpt and gunmetal grey goes here for the top. And I mean, the tread detail looks sick, but sadly, no wheels here at the base. So it essentially is just a glorified paperweight. I'm not going to lie. I don't think the blades look particularly cool, just kind of jutting out to the side. You can actually rotate that, so I guess that's kind of cool, but yet again, not really a saving grace if I'm going to be honest. So yeah, definitely a weak alt form, and I think it it could have 100% had been saved had they just put a few wheels here on the base so that we could have actually got this rolling along the ground. I think from a proportion perspective, it just looks really strange, just kind of like a brick, if I'm going to be honest. Now turning to some vehicle mode comparisons, here we have Skullgrin compared alongside the core class Pretender Shell Iguanas. Now sadly this guy won't stand up, but why would he? I guess he's a bike. But just to showcase what these guys look like in their alt forms, this actually has proper rolling wheels, which makes the alt mode fun and enjoyable for older and younger collectors alike to mess around with. Whereas with this, I just think it's a pointless alt form, as there's literally nothing you can do with it at all. It doesn't roll, it just drags, it just literally sits there, and it's not even a decent looking vehicle. Here for another comparison, we have the core class wheelie, yet again a figure which is in the core class price point, but this actually has 4 proper rolling wheels, meaning that it's a practical functioning vehicle form, whereas this yet again a glorified paperweight. And finally, here we have him next to the Voyager class Eartherized Optimus Prime, and as you guys can see, I'd say roughly on par in terms of length, which is yet again why I think scale wise this thing just looks really bad. Had they found a way to have compressed the legs, maybe just made it look more like a tank, it could have been slightly more forgiving. But Cybertronian hovercraft, honestly, I'm not buying it at all. And so, some final thoughts for Transformers Legacy Deluxe Class Skullgrin. In all, it's a rather mediocre average release, if I'm going to be honest. I haven't actually been that impressed with any of the deluxe figures from Wave 3. They've all been pretty mid. I thought Dead End definitely had his problems in the legs. I wasn't a huge fan of Point Blank. I also didn't think that Crankcase was great. I mean, it was definitely an improvement when in comparison to the Wave 1 Skids mold, but just in general, these figures have definitely had corners cut, and I see that here with Skullgrin. Now, I know that you guys are going to think that I'm being too critical, but I recently put out a review over on the channel for the Studio Series Deluxe Class Lamborghini Hot Rod. Now, I'm not too sure about overseas, but here in the UK, all of the Wave 3 Deluxe figures from Legacy retail for the same price point as those Studio Series Deluxes, at least at the time of this recording, and that Hot Rod is mind-blowing from a Deluxe perspective. The vehicle mode and the robot mode look exactly how they did from the film, and that is a Michael Bay Transformers 5 movie design. So why they can't make as impressive figures here for Legacy, I just don't know. I mean, the figure looks decent as a robot. I really do like the robot mode design, I'm going to be honest. I think making the Pretender shells their own distinctive robots instead of having a gimmick is a decent concept. But why they are in different scale classes is beyond me. I think it would have made way more sense had they all either been deluxes or been core class. Personally, I would have rather them all been core classes. And then as far as the vehicle mode goes, I just don't like it. I think it's pointless. There's no reason for me to transform it into this mode because the hover tank doesn't look the greatest and it isn't functioning. There are no wheels, there's no gimmicks. The only thing that you can actually do with it is rotate the turret. So sadly, I don't think the vehicle mode is great at all. The robot mode is decent. If you're a fan of the Pretender shells, then yeah, it's a decent figure and probably one of the better ones from Wave 3, but honestly, that's not saying much. I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you guys think that I'm being way too harsh on some of these more recent Transformers Legacy figures, or do you think the criticism is justified? I just think that us as collectors are now paying way more than we ever have, and the cost of living is continuously increasing, so at the moment, for many of us, these products are luxury items. They're things that we go out and buy because we've got a few extra pounds, and I just don't think that these at the moment are giving us the same bang for our buck as they were a few years back, or even when compared to some of their other Transformers lines. Definitely be sure to sound off down in the comment section below. I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.